Testing, 1, 2, 3, 4, testing. Testing. You happy with this level? Testing. 5, 6, 7, 8, testing. Testing, good.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Vice-Chancellor, Deputy Chancellor, members of Council and members of the university community. I'm pleased to welcome you here this afternoon to the University Community Meeting on behalf of the Council, I'd like to thank you all for attending. In accordance with the University of Adelaide's Act, the meeting is convened by Council and presided over by the Vice-Chancellor. I wish to acknowledge the Kaurna people, the original custodians of the Adelaide Plains, and the land upon which the university's campuses at Waite, Roseworthy and here in Adelaide are built. The purpose of the annual community meeting is to provide an opportunity for dialogue between council staff, the university students and graduates on the state of the university and the major opportunities and challenges that we face. Part of my role at this university is to chair meetings of University Council, which of course has the overall responsibility of the oversight and review of the strategic direction and performance of the University of Adelaide. In 2015, extending into 2016, Council discussed the governance role and its performance. It decided to request from the state government amendments to reduce the size of Council and also to establish an executive committee that could take actions in between Council meetings. That legislation is currently in Parliament and we hope will be debated in the coming months. I'd like to thank members of Council and senior managers for their ongoing attention to the business of Council and for their close consideration of the many important issues that have been addressed in 2016. In particular, I'd like to thank Diane Davidson, the Deputy Chancellor. Di served 12 years on Council. She's been instrumental in many of its committees, and in 2014 she undertook a very extensive governance review of Council and acted as the Chancellor in between Chancellor appointments. We farewell Di on Friday night. It's a wonderful contribution over 12 years, and we certainly thank her for that ongoing work. And Di will come back as an external member of Estate and Infrastructure. The university's reputation for excellence in research is again evidenced by the range of research grants received this year. 13.5 million awarded from the National Health and Medical Research Council, including 6 grants over $1 million. $16.6 million from the Australian Research Council, comprising 36 grants for major research projects and fellowships, early career funding and infrastructure. $2.6 million for the establishment of an ARC research hub for graphene-enabled industry transformation. $4.5 million from the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, and $1 million from the Australia-China Joint Centre for Grains and Health. This research success is mirrored by the enhanced standing of the university in the world rankings. The university rose to 142 in the Times Higher Education ranking and rose to 139 in the Shanghai Jiao Tong. Whilst there are uncertainties in relation to future federal funding for education and certainly increased competition for domestic and international students, the university finished 2016 in a very sound financial position. The budget projections for 2017 show the university continuing to maintain a reasonable margin to meet its commitments. The success of the university is testimony to the dedication and the work of its staff and students, and on behalf of the Council I want to express my gratitude for the efforts that are made on an ongoing basis. This will be the last community meeting for our Vice-Chancellor. Warren, we wish you the very best in retirement. You've made a significant contribution to the vision of this university through the Beacon, through the ongoing sound financial management, through the management of infrastructure. We are about to open our largest capital investment venture, $246 million for a medical and dental facility that was delivered on time, on budget. And much of this work has been heralded during your term. So we wish you the very best and thank you for your contribution to this university. That said, the King is dead, long live the King. We're about now to, and have commenced, a global search for a Vice-Chancellor. I hope you've been getting the updates that have been provided. That process is well underway. We had 60 interviews a couple of weeks ago. That information was collated, put before the VC selection panel, and formed the basis of the candidate booklet that was released earlier this week. I expect that I will continue to inform you of progress as it occurs. My expectation is that we will have a recommendation to go to Council in May, but of course a lot can happen within that time. Clearly it's of interest for the university to start the new Vice-Chancellor as we possibly can. On that note, I'll hand over to the Vice-Chancellor.
Thank you, Chancellor, and colleagues and members of the community. Welcome to 2017. You'll be relieved to know that my presentation is mercifully short, just 7 slides to allow plenty of time for questions and raising of other issues. So first of all, just 3 slides on our progress last year, our continued commitment to enhance teaching with e-learning and digital innovation continues. Canvas, Echo 360, the rollover to e-assessment are all on track. Over 90% of our bachelor's courses now have work experience or a work in integrated learning element in them as we increase the career readiness of our undergraduate students. 400,000 students now around the world registered with us to do the MOOCs through Adelaide X, and I would predict 1 million by the end of next year, making us one of the really significant participants in this kind of global digital education. The Adelaide Education Academy program is underway now, 64 education specialists now its members and more to come. Our particular pleasure is that our outreach program, which sets out to sow the seeds of aspiration to study at university amongst some of the most disadvantaged students in the state, continues to expand. The Children's University reaching now more than 4,000 children. Our campus program increasing its reach by 47% last year. We took the decision last year, after a number of years of disappointing results, to close our campus-based program in Singapore, and the wind-up there is well underway. When we need to vacate at the end of the year, most of the students to whom we have teach-out obligations will have been dealt with. Research and research training, we've implemented now the new research strategy, and some of you will be aware of the new fellowships, the PhD scholarships, the infrastructure money. We took a decision to appoint a few theme leaders in areas either of great research strength or of great national priority, coordinators who would bring together effort and resource from right across the campus around themes where we were very strong or where we wanted to make our presence felt. Mike Webb, the first of those theme leaders, was appointed Director of Defence and Security, and he's made a great impact in taking us ahead with the opportunities presented by the Next Technology Defence grants from Canberra and the opportunities of the sub-build coming here. We remain one of just 2 universities in Australia to have yet had a grant from the Defence Next Technology Fund. Towards the end of the year, we appointed Andy Lowe as a theme leader in food innovation, and there'll be more of those appointments to come. We continue to maintain a fund to appoint researchers at the extreme top end of their field around the world, and we now have 5 staff in the Thomson Reuters High Citation Index, which is so important to rankings, which the Chancellor have mentioned. We're now in the top 150 universities in the world in all three of the major world university rankings. And we've taken the National Innovation and Science Agenda very seriously. The state government has accepted our bid to put an innovation hub on the old Royal Adelaide site as that's developed. And while we're waiting for that, we'll be opening an interim innovation hub called Think Lab Adelaide in May across the road at Nexus 10. Adelaide Enterprise is starting to win goals, kick goals now with its increased focus on licensing, on startups, and our commercialisation income keeps us in the toppermost group of Australian universities, number 2 by volume of research contracts, number 4 by income. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, a number of workforce initiatives completed last year. At long last, we achieved our ambition to have 30% of our positions, senior positions occupied by women, which just is the pretext to now revise upward what was a miserably modest target. PSR, the professional staff review, is largely complete, and the benefits of that will start to flow through quite soon. The budget position's been mentioned. We completed our asset divestment program that we needed to complete to fund the new medical dental nursing building. And as the Chancellor has mentioned, when the annual report is released, I expect we'll have the strongest budget position certainly in my 5 years. After a lot of consultation, the Council adopted in principle a campus master plan that will govern the shape of what we do physically on our campuses for the next 20 years. And it was a great relief to me after stagnation of our philanthropic income that at last we're making serious headway now. Our fundraising doubled last year, and that's a good beginning to finally get to the major fundraising campaign that I would have liked to see here. I put up this slide last year which just summarised the 6 adjustments we'd made to the Beacon strategic plan in the new operational plan. I put the slide up again now with ticks to show that 4 of the 6 areas are either now achieved or coming close to being achieved. There's 2 things yet to go, but it's a 3-year operational plan, and last year was only the first year. So from the past to the present, 2017 marks the 4th year of uncertainty about what the coalition government intends to do in reforming higher education in Australia. A major discussion paper they released before the federal election seems to have disappeared into the ether. We have no idea what recommendations flow from that. Still in the forward estimates is an intention to save $3.7 billion from Australian universities. Does this mean that Minister Birmingham will go forward with his 20% cuts to our CSP funding, or will he ameliorate that by a change to student fee policy? We don't know. He promises we will know soon. All universities celebrated NISA, the launch of the National Innovation and Science Agenda, when Malcolm Turnbull announced it when he took up his post as Prime Minister. But he got little traction with it in the federal election last year. Clearly the public at large either don't understand this or simply don't care. And since then, federal ministers have gone rather quiet on it. Happily in South Australia, commercialisation of research and innovation is one of the state's 10 economic priorities, so we continue to press on with it quite seriously. Still unclear where the Medical Research Futures Fund is going, and a recent attempt by the government to transfer the EAF fund, which is that huge accumulation of money that was put there to help research infrastructure around the nation, to transfer that elsewhere, seems to have been stopped when the Commonwealth has realised they'd need legislation to actually take it out of universities. Meanwhile, we will begin the year with steady enrolments and again a very high mean ATAR for our students. Our domestic numbers are flat, as in all Australian universities. The demand-driven system's soaked up all the unmet demand, and there's just not more out there. But there are growth opportunities internationally, and since this was printed, it's confirmed that our international intake this year is up 9%, not 4%. The great weight of that is in postgraduate coursework and research, which is good news. But we mustn't become complacent about the dominant position we're still in student enrolment in this state. The group of 8 universities are now aggressively recruiting here in South Australia. We've decided this year to return the compliment, and so for the first year we'll be piloting recruitment interstate. We need to ramp up our recruitment of postgraduate coursework students where we're very under the benchmark, and we're looking to broaden our vista beyond China for international students. There'll be a quite important India roadshow in the next couple of months. It's a considerable concern that our research grants in total this year amount to 160 million, which is down 6%, and there'll be 2 reviews to try and work out a way forward with this. A particular concern is what now is a 3-year pattern of decline in health and biomedical science competitive grants. We'll do a review there involving external expertise and one in the wait. We're also going further with our graduate career readiness, introducing at the end of the year individual statements of attributes which will go with the students' transcripts to show the generic skills that employers are looking for that they've gained by being here. Our strategic plan, the Beacon of Enlightenment, enters its 5th year this year, and I'd always said that after 5 years it should be reviewed. There should be a thoroughgoing piece of consultation on campus involving staff, students, alumni, external stakeholders of the kind we did in 2012 when this was being developed, really to work out whether this is the right direction for the next 5 years or whether it should be revised, or indeed whether there should be a totally different direction. Now that review will be the work, an early task of my successor, and I just wanted to make one observation about it because it will involve all of you. The universities around the world that are most successful in this environment of change and globalisation are those that have articulated a very clear mission and very clear values. It's interesting to me that the really big players in the MOOCs, those with more than 2 million students each, are not universities like Phoenix that have tried to be all digital things to all global people, but great traditional universities like Edinburgh, MIT, Harvard, where the mission and the values are absolutely clear, where they project a sense of place, of connection with their city and what they stand for. So I was going to say to all of you that as you consider adapting to change, you need to ask whether the change aligns with our mission and our values. Otherwise, we lose our way. Can I wish you all the very best as that review is undertaken. Thank you.
The Chancellor and I are very happy to take questions. Or not.
Thank you. My name's John Keeler. I'm vaguely associated with the law school, having retired from it some time ago. It would be, I think, just churlish not to start by thanking our retiring Vice-Chancellor for the work he's done in trying to reorient our thinking into getting back to some more what we might describe as traditional values, while at the same time he must have done this in an institution and a state which he found much more complicated than he could possibly have expected when he came here. After that, I'd like to go to your first point, which is the change in the University Act. The university is defined by the Act as being the council, the staff, the students and the graduates. And this is the first time that you have told the university of the bill which is currently before Parliament. As I read it, one of the consequences of that bill will be this. Council will be up to 16 members, 7 of whom will be appointed by council, 1 of whom will be co-opted by council, and 2 of whom are yourself as Chancellor and the Vice-Chancellor, who are of course also appointed by council. Admittedly, council makes these appointments on the advice of committees. Most of the members of those committees are either appointed by council, yourself, or the Vice-Chancellor. Part of one committee is, admittedly, appointed by the chair of the Graduates Association, who in turn is appointed by the Vice-Chancellor, and he chooses 2 other members of the Graduates Association Committee, most of whom are appointed by council. It's a very self-referential body. As you also said, council actually has a rather limited role, a supervisory role, in the course of which it is responsible, answerable to absolutely nobody. You yourself have on occasion said members of council are responsible to council. There is no one else. So it's going to be 2/3 of the membership of council is going to be chosen in this self-referential way by a group which is responsible to nobody, unless you're right, though I think it's a solecism in saying itself. It also operates in a way which cannot be regarded as transparent. Its agendas are confidential, its papers are confidential, it chooses after each meeting which minutes it will publish. And I checked over the weekend, the last minutes that were published were those of the meeting in May 2016, so I assume that everything since then has had to be confidential. I don't think that in ordinary corporate or any other kind of institutional governance, anything that's as self-referential and opaque as that can be run without, over time, producing some rather major risks which need to be addressed. There is one other consequence of that too. The Vice-Chancellor came round to all the departments of the university towards the end of last year to talk about 2 things. One of them is the new master plan, and the other was the results of a voice survey which showed that in general staff and students were not entirely confident in the upper management of the university, of which council is a part. I do say a limited part, but that's not generally understood. And those meetings by the Vice-Chancellor emphasised that because he recorded a number of decisions which had already been made about a master plan by council, many of which were going to affect how people did their jobs in practice. But it was just a report of something which had happened way above. So what I would like to do is ask whether in the course of your review of governance, you actually looked at the problems of a self-referential body with no responsibilities outside itself, operating in private, and whether or not council has addressed not merely the problems of, say, the senior managers not having the confidence of the staff and students, but whether or not council can operate in a situation where it may well not have them either.
Let me start by saying that the Council Selection Committee is an amalgam of alumni, 3 appointed by the alumni organisation and 3 by the Chancellor. And its role is to select members of council. Should the legislation be approved, then all elements of representation on council will be reduced to the number of 16 as I've suggested. And that includes those appointed. Already, I have not appointed the Chancellor's representative on the basis that I think council is too large already and it doesn't provide that continuity of discourse that's necessary for a complex organisation and the roles and responsibilities that it has. And those roles are clearly defined in the Act. To go to your question about whether that issue has been represented in the university, I've certainly not hidden the fact. We've had these discussions in 2015 and 2016. Council decided to make a recommendation to government to reduce the number, and that number will be reduced across all elements of representation. But we will keep all elements of representation onto the council because I see the value in that. What I don't see in value in the council work is an inability to have, over the period of the council meeting, 21 people trying to have a sensible discussion on the complex issues that are before it. The Act defines our responsibilities. We are responsible to the Act. I'm not sure why minutes haven't been on the website from May. I don't consider most of what we discuss to be confidential. It might be before the meeting. I certainly see a need for a discourse after the council meeting so that members understand the issues that are being discussed and what council actually considers and the decisions that it makes. So that I will check up to see why that, if that is the case, why that hasn't been published. But I am absolutely adamant that to have an effective council meeting to discuss the complex issues that governance of an almost billion-dollar enterprise, we need a level of representation that can have the discourse to discuss the complex issues that are before us. And trying to do that with 21 people around the table, I think, has compromised the quality of what we do. So I make absolutely no apologies for trying to get a more effective council and for the fact that council is responsible, as you say, under the Act for its governance responsibilities. I'll let the Chancellor talk about the plan for infrastructure for the future, but I can tell you that Council was advised that there were considerable discussions throughout the university on the master plan and what people wanted. I think the master plan is an aspiration. I think also that we'll have our work cut out before us to make the finance available to be able to do that. But there's no doubt in my mind, without quality people, without quality infrastructure and equipment, we will find it very difficult to maintain our place as one of those leading educational institutions in Australia.
John, thank you for your kind comments at the beginning of what you said. I always enjoy our discourse, but the problem is here it's not just a discourse with us. I'm just concerned that we won't have a lot of questions if they're all quite of that length. On the campus master plan, I guess I'd be interested to hear more specifically what others would like to know about that.
Thank you. I'm actually going to follow on from John's because the Minister told Parliament that the universities put in place their own engagement processes to engage with their communities and explain the proposed amendments. And I'm just concerned that what you're telling us is that the University Council has gone ahead and made these decisions without actually consulting the community. So I'm wondering, did the university mislead the Minister or did the Minister mislead Parliament?
I can tell you what we have done. I'll leave the Minister to explain what she's done. But as I've explained to you, the governance responsibility of council is a responsibility of council. I don't see a need for coming back to the broader community to have a discussion on how council should go about its business.
Sorry, I'd like to push back on that a little.
Could I finish?
Of course.
Thank you. And therefore, the very engaged conversation that we had at council about its governance responsibilities, in my view, was the appropriate place to decide how the council should go about its governance. I don't see a need to go to the broader community to have that engagement.
Can I just ask a follow-up question though, which is why was the process different at the University of Adelaide to Flinders University, which did at least hold some consultations with the broader staff and community?
Well, that's up for the Flinders University, but don't think for one moment that suddenly we had this idea in council and it wasn't discussed with some members of the community. It was. Council members and myself had discussions with the community. We looked at the governance review that was conducted in 2014, and I had the benefit of looking at council operations for 6 to 9 months. So, and I don't know what Flinders did. I should point out that what we are going towards is the same size council that currently operates at the University of South Australia. It's not a dramatic change in numbers. It's attempting to improve the dialogue and the contribution that council members can make at meetings.
And then can I just have one final, I know this, I'm firing quick fire questions, just to clarify, so you are voluntarily not appointing members of council, but you will legislatively cap the number of staff and student representatives, or will your power to appoint also be removed?
No, what I said to you was that the Chancellor's representative has not been appointed to council because I'm concerned with the number of people around the council table. What I have said is that each member of council will finish their term. So there'll be no changes. So that means that if the legislation is approved, nothing will happen in terms of the council size for another at least 12 to 18 months.
But then
I think that's
proportions
enough. Thanks. I'm happy to take other questions, but I'd rather...
Other people, yeah, obviously.
Thank you. Well, no, it's not the rather people. Looking more questions.
Hello, my name is Simon. I'm a fifth year medical student and the president of the Adelaide Medical Students Society. Very excited about our new building down the end and getting to see that in less than a couple of weeks' time. There has been some concern from the students that there are still classes at the old building as well as the new building, and that they are required to, in some cases, walk roughly a half-hour journey in the space of 10 minutes. So just on that, we sort of have two questions. One being that will there be services in place to help these students go between the campuses, particularly those with disabilities or conditions that make that more difficult? And the other question is that the main reason that this transport is happening is to use the anatomy labs that exist in the current building. And so our question is, why were the anatomy labs not considered in the new building, and will they be considered in the future?
I'll leave the Vice-Chancellor that.
The problem's actually bigger than just anatomy. So, for example, with dentistry, you know, we have the dental sim lab here and the preclinical education here, then the clinical experience down in the top 3 floors of our building, which is the new Adelaide Dental Hospital. There never was a proposal to move absolutely all non-clinical teaching from here to there. There's just too much of it, and the faculty continues to be involved in 7 locations around Adelaide. But of course a bigger issue for us at the moment is that we're opening on time and on budget, and the Royal Adelaide Hospital is not, and the original plan was they would open together, because of course a very significant issue is both clinicians and students walking between our building and the new Adelaide Hospital. Now that's evidently months away. So we're going to need to put in free shuttle buses, just as we have for Roseworthy, and the Dean and I have been talking about that. We're just trying to work out the extent of the problem, but you know, I'm pretty sure we're going to need a free service back and forth, and not just for students. Ultimately, of course, the tram extension is going to take care of this, and we're hoping to make a special arrangement with the government so that going back and forth on the tram will be either at no cost or very inexpensive for our staff and students, because it never was the case that the purpose of that building is to take the things that need to be close to the clinical setting. It never ever was going to take all of our wet lab teaching, all of our preclinical teaching. The whole operation's far too big to fit on that site. So, but once we get the tram, things will be much better, and as you may know from the original announcement, the tram was finished last month. The latest is it'll be this December.
Chancellor, Vice-Chancellor, thank you for your talks. I'm Tony from the domestic recruitment team. So the first thing is, after 10 years of doing this on your behalf, I'm really pleased to see some more investment in interstate recruitment. That's a great thing. Locally, I just wondered how concerned we were about the bits of market share that UniSA are constantly and steadily stealing from us. It strikes me that some of that might be just the programme off. I'm constantly meeting parents and students and school teachers who are puzzled as to why a university as great as ours doesn't offer things like physiotherapy, primary teaching. So I just wondered, maybe it's a question for the new Vice-Chancellor, whether that's on the agenda for the future.
There's actually several bits to your question, isn't there? I mean, one is about recruitment for our present programs, another about whether we should add other programs that we don't teach. I mean, certainly from my point of view, the last thing we should do is duplicate everything that's already on offer. 3 physiotherapy programs would make as little sense as other areas where there's already 3 in Adelaide. So I'm not sure we're going to duplicate what others are doing. Look, the evidence so far, unless you've seen something very recent and different, that UniSA is making inroads in our traditional programs is not very compelling. There's certainly an enormous investment in marketing going on, and we specifically investigated the effect of that in 1 or 2 faculties last year, and found out that despite all of the oomph being put in by our competitor universities, the enrolment pattern remained the same. But that said, because, from my point of view, as I read the figures, the threat is less from competition from the 2 local universities than it is from the interstate group of 8s who are here. They're targeting the bright students, which is the ones where we dominate. They're offering them huge scholarships. And I do think we need to ramp up our effort in domestic schools, principally to address the threat from interstate GO8s.
Yeah, thank you. If I can just be cheeky, Vice-Chancellor, and suggest that on the duplication issue, after a few years, I think if we were to offer physio and primary teaching, one of the other universities would throw the towel in, and we would win, because the students, the students want to be here and not there. They only go there because they can't come here to do it.
That's
Thank
what
you.
we like, belief in the University of Adelaide. We love it.
Vice-Chancellor, I'm wondering about the gender equity targets. It's Deb Turnbull up the back. Congratulations on meeting our targets, and I'm wanting to get a sense from the Council about their vision with respect to the future and what we can continue to do to develop performance in this respect.
Well, thanks, Deb, and thank you also for all your efforts in this regard. As you know, achieving 30% simply cements us at the bottom of the sector, and the sector-wide average for women in senior positions is 41%. So we still are a long, long way short of where we need to be. Now, as to what Council's attitude is, I'm assuming Council will take a recommendation from us about the resetting of that target, and I think it's up to VCE and your own committee now to propose what ought to be the next step after 30%. But 30% is not where a university like this ought to be. Others?
Nicole Beaumont, Council Secretary. I just wanted to, if that's all right, Warren, answer John's question. As Council Secretary for the, and I welcome his question, I'm delighted that somebody's interested in governance other than the Council Secretariat. Since becoming Council Secretary, I've put the minutes as well as I could on the web available to the community. That had not happened for my predecessor. It is my error that the 2016 ones are not up to date. 2015 are there for anybody to look at, all 8 meetings, and it will continue in 2017.
Thank you. And there's another one a couple of rows back. Andrew?
This might be, hi Warren, this is Dave Adelson. I might have a question here for the Chancellor to do with the recruitment of the next Vice-Chancellor. And I'd just like to thank you, Warren, for your contribution as Vice-Chancellor. Chancellor, there was supposed to be and I believe there was, a consultation period for staff to provide feedback on what they considered to be desirable traits for the next Vice-Chancellor, for the next candidates that we should be looking at. I personally don't recall seeing an invitation for consultation. I didn't see one go out to all staff. I understand there has been some consultation, but I'm not sure how that was actually carried out. The resulting list of desirable traits, whilst appropriate perhaps for a corporation, may or may not be necessarily the best set of traits for the Vice-Chancellor of a GO8 university, in that I didn't seem to see any stress or desire for strong academic leadership or a strong record of academic contribution, particularly in research. And if one looks at ANU, who recently hired a new Vice-Chancellor, they hired Brian Schmidt, who happens to be a Nobel laureate. Probably no coincidence there, and that's the kind, I think, of Vice-Chancellor that we should aspire to hire. And I'm just wondering about the criteria and the search process and whether that's what we're looking for or not.
Okay, in terms of the process, we selected, I think, 60 members from throughout the university to have an interview with the Search Agency. They were a mixture of VCE, academic board, students, professional staff, and I was delighted with the input. Now, I think 60 is a reasonably representative group. The attributes that you see at the back of the candidate booklet reflect those views and also the views of the selection panel. The selection panel has Professor Ian Young, Vice-Chancellor of ANU, Swinburne, Professor John Williams, the Chair of Academic Board here, the Deputy Chancellor, the Honourable Catherine Branson, David Hill, who is the National Deloitte's Managing Partner, Christine Locker, HR expertise, and myself. And certainly academic research capability is mentioned within the booklet. It is important, as are the other attributes that are been identified. My expectation is that the person will come with a strong academic research background, because that's really the genes of the university. I think it's adequately covered within the document, so I'm comfortable that where we go for our global and national search, that's the calibre of the individual that we'll be looking for. And Deb, to get to your point, Council is certainly interested in the next version of the gender document to bring us up, at the very least, to national levels. Other questions?
Hi, I'm Andrew Allison. I'm from ECMS. I'd like to ask about the master plan. I think we've all seen the pictures and the models, and the buildings all look very grand, but I don't think it's going to be cheap. The advertiser estimates that it's about $1 billion worth of capital. So the next question is, where much is given, much will be required. So is the university going to turn into a degree factory, or are we going to be in the pocket of donors, in which case that limits the kind of research we can do? And viewed as a capital investment, how long is it going to take for us to pay off that $1 billion? What's the break-even time there?
They're very good questions. I'll get the Vice-Chancellor to talk, but from a council perspective, there's work underway on how we might finance that. We are very mindful of the manner in which the medical building was financed, and this is an enormous undertaking that will span many years. It will need to be a balanced approach of both investment and debt. I'll look forward to seeing what the university management bring forward in terms of a plan to bring that master plan to fruition. But you're quite right, it will take us a number of years, and the university must be able to sustain itself during that period and make those investments into people and equipment that keeps us at a very vibrant level within the GO8. And Vice-Chancellor might have some more specifics.
The critical thing at the moment is to cost stage one. It's a bit hard to cost anything that's 20 years away. But the universities who are doing this kind of thing at the moment really are doing it in partnership, because there's no longer any Commonwealth grants for infrastructure. The $60 million that we got for the new medical dental nursing building, which was the largest grant ever made in this state to a university, you'll never see the likes of that again. So mostly one needs to do this in partnership. The master plan contains 3 student accommodation components. We hope to contract with a student accommodation developer, and we'll bring the land. We can bring rental guarantees. They will bring the capital. We won't put money into those. The big tower, the new law school, business school, economics school, hopefully we will partner with an Australian super fund. Again, we'll bring the land, they'll bring the capital. It's easy when you haven't got any money, because you can think of just about anything. But the building we probably will have to pay for is the new Gateway building next to Benighton Hall, because the traditional title of our original land is such that it makes it very difficult to involve a partner in a building on the land. But Council's position on funding capital works has changed very much since we approved the medical dental nursing school. As the Chancellor said, I think Council is very mindful that the way that was built, which was by paying out of cash, and therefore for putting a huge burden on our operating funds, that's not something we can really repeat. But I think we have an excellent finance committee now that will come up with some quite innovative ways of funding that building, which won't impact on our operating. I mean, for example, as you know, interest rates at the moment are at historic lows. There's university